Hello, we are gathered here today to do the usual card comparison study. So let me get the usual list of disclaimers. I've been reading tarot for a while, but just for myself and not in any sort of formal manner. I'm a beginner, essentially, not a teacher or an expert. I may get things incorrect. I have gotten things incorrect. But really, look, the value of this is I have a lot of decks. I'm going to get the same card from all the decks, and we're just going to go over them. It's a comparison. So, even if you don't like my commentary or it's not useful to you or you have more experience, you can at least see all of these cards and do kind of a self-directed study as well. I'm not going to do it exactly as a flip through like I did before, where it's just kind of silent and I just give you the name of the cards. I'll give you, I don't know, I'll mention some things, especially when we go over the first card. I'll just kind of talk about the usual symbolic elements, but I'll try and keep it somewhat minimal still. These aren't curated, I just pull all of them. So are they the best? I mean, no, it's just whatever I got. Mostly mass market, as I generally just get stuff from local shops. Do you need this many decks? No. Do I need this many decks? No. But yeah, all right, let's get on with it. Okay. The first one we have here is from the Tarot 1909 round, so there's a little bit of extra stuff added here because they extended the sides, but generally this is the standard RWS imagery that we're going to see in a lot of cards for the most part, or at least what they're going to be referencing a lot of the times. So we have a naked woman. I think that usually reflects, purity or innocence or just like a divine being. She's getting a divine download, I guess you could say, from the stars up here. Sometimes this is the North Star. She's got these two urns here, and she's pouring them both out continuously without fear that the water's ever going to end. Part of it, and one of her feet is on the water here, indicating refilling spirit. Might be her own spirit as well. So kind of pouring out, but also rejuvenating oneself. And then the other urn is pouring out onto the land, often thought of as the material world. I did see some decks that mentioned these 5 streams may be referring to the 5 senses as well. I thought that was interesting. There's a bird in the background, and it's kind of commonly agreed to be an ibis, apparently. It looks kind of like a naked turkey to me, but we'll go with what the experts say on that. The upright meaning for this is generally things, it's a very, very positive card. It can be considered a wish card, a hopeful card. It's about faith, healing, regeneration, receiving guidance, often divine guidance especially. If it's reversed, it's more like instead of so this card follows after the Tower, right, and is often considered the calm after the storm. So a lot of times it's really thought in relation to the Tower. So it's that place of healing and, getting everything back together after catastrophe, right? So if it is in reversed, instead of being in a place of healing and calm, you're feeling hopeless or discouraged or despairing. Maybe even feeling uninspired if you're taking the upright of this card to mean about like creative inspiration that you're getting, from the divine or something like that. Anyways, that's just a very general overview. So let's see. Next one we have here is the Tarot Vintage. Very same, just a color variation essentially. So you can see that it just doesn't show as much on these sides, but has the same symbols. This one is the Everyday Tarot Mini, and it really just reduces everything to the symbols. So this is the Darkwood Tarot. So here you've got, fewer of the actions, but you still have the same main character and a lot of the same symbolic elements, right? Okay, this is the Tarot of the Witch's Garden. And the guidebook for this one does mention that the peacock is intended to represent energetic power, hypnotic strength, and manifested destiny. So just kind of leaning into the aspect of, you know, the divine feminine, or, you know, input from the universe and the divine. I've got a falling star in the background. It's the Druidcraft Tarot. Again, it's got a lot of those traditional elements. Of course, in the background, we also have Stonehenge. The guidebook for this one did mention that it went with dawn instead of, you know, a lot of the star cards are like full nighttime. But I think it was going with that in the sense of, you know, the dawn always follows after even a rough or difficult night, right? Now, the next couple cards, they're just very, very simplified versions. So this is from the illustrated playing cards deck, and they literally just have this star imagery on here, and they've attached it to the Seven of Diamonds. It's a deck that doesn't have a majors. It's really just a playing card deck, and so they included the majors on some of the what would usually just be a minor card. So Seven of Diamonds, I think, would be a pentacle. Here we have the Wild Unknown, and again, this is just a very, very simplified card where we really just have the star itself, and it's kind of shining its beams downwards. And this is actually from the Cosma Visions Oracle, which is essentially a tarot system, in my opinion. And the card that would be equivalent to the star is the Veil. I thought that was pretty interesting because the star card does have those implications of of a divine download, is the way I saw a couple places describe it, where you are getting information from the universe, from the divine. And here is a person kind of part way through the veil, just like the original star card is part on land and part on water, and they're peeking through and getting some information from behind the high priestess's veil, right? And then this one is the New Chapter Tarot, I believe. And it's just very, very simplified. They've just got some geometric star shapes. They've got one in the center. And then if you continue outwards, there's additional stars as well. Okay, this is from the Murder of Crows Tarot. And it's a kind of a dark, grimmer deck, but I do think this is supposed to be a positive character doing the same sort of thing that you would see in the regular deck. Of course, it's a crow deck, so we've got a crow here instead of the usual ibis. This is the Motherpeace Tarot. I think this is a particularly pretty star. We've got someone relaxing here. She just kind of have like a light halo around her, and we've got the star up here, so I think it does still indicate divinity. And specifically, the guidebook mentions that this is intended to be the Babylonian goddess Ishtar. So I'm not entirely sure whether that's an ibis in the back or if it might be a different bird, maybe like a hawk or something like that. The guidebook didn't mention that one in particular, but... And, you know, we don't have pouring of the water, but we've got the water here, and then we've got some coming down on both the water and the land. So, yeah, just a little different. This is a Marseille deck. It's the Squid Cake Marseille. So I'm not familiar with Marseille, and I haven't studied this one yet. We do have a lot of the same imagery. However, the person is pouring water only into the water and not onto land. And I did look at the guidebook, and it mentioned that it's more about surrendering what you don't need. So maybe Marseille has different standard means for the star than RWS. I wouldn't know. Again, I haven't looked into it, but I wanted to provide the card for you to see if you do know and wanted to think about those differences. This one is from the Tarot of the Fifth Spirit. I really love the position of the star in this one. I think it seems truly relaxed and at ease, where the normal star pose isn't quite so much. I do think this is still an ibis because it's got a really long beak there. And then we've got the symbol for Aquarius there, which this card is associated with, the air element symbol, and then little symbol right back. And I like that this one actually includes the tower. So, you know, it's saying something has crumbled in the past, but now you're here. You're, you know, you're cleaning up, you're recovering. I believe that's another planetary symbol, but I can't recall off the top of my head what it is. I have been slacking in learning those. This is from the Mystic Dreamer Tarot. It's a photo collage deck. In the background, I think we still have the ibis. It still looks like one. The guidebook did mention, and I do think it's interesting, we've got a waterfall here, so it might be indicating, you know, rough waters in the past, but now you're in this calmer area. We've got this pentacle here. The guidebook did mention, yes, the pentacle equals the 5 senses, and it's dimmed in this image because this card is asking you to rely on that less and more on energy from the universe, right? So I thought that was interesting. Here's the Morgan Greer. We'll see this sort of arrangement later in the Hermetic Tarot as well. Maybe we just kind of have some bowls instead of the urns, but otherwise the usual imagery. Here we have the Bee Tarot. And this one I was a bit confused at first, because if I'm just looking at this image with no additional information, I would think it's threat, almost like a person who's unaware with a bunch of wasps in the background. But since it is the Bee Tarot, the wasps are actually often one of the main characters. So in the Tower card for this deck, they've just had their home destroyed, and the point of this card is that they're rebuilding. So it's one that I would probably misinterpret if not familiar with the deck, or I don't know. I think it would probably give me some alternate readings sometimes. I appreciate that they're giving us some booty in this card instead, just, you know, really changing it up a bit. This one, we have, this is the Heaven and Earth Tarot. So again, we've got that same bit that we're going to see again in the Hermetic Tarot with the planetary symbols on there, like Moon, Venus, etc. We've got some Hebrew letters down there if you're interested in that. I think this might be location on the Tree of Life. I just don't study that as much myself. The Aquarius symbol. Looks like we've got the ibis as usual. Kind of an interesting pinup pose. All I can think of those are those posters about doing a breast exam. She's got her arm up in the right position for that. It's really all I can think of. Maybe I'm an immature person. I apologize. Here we have the Gilded Tarot Royale. I'm going to hope I did it right this time. But so this deck often has more steampunk elements, but really we've got the same symbology overall. Although they did go with a blue jay instead of the usual ibis. I don't think it mentioned any other intended symbology though, apart from the usual. And here we've got, this is the Deviant Moon Tarot, and this one, some of the same imagery. I think they intend the same message. This is intended to be a positive character. Everyone just looks really creepy in this deck. The guidebook mentioned that this indicates even higher optimism than usual because this person is continuing to pour out water in a land that's very parched. So they have optimism for the future and that their actions are going to make a difference, even though it might not look like it at first. Here we have, again, most of the usual imagery here, especially when you've got like this aura coming out from the top. Really adds that sort of divine energy, I think. Lotuses do also reflect divinity or purity, just because they start in the mud and then grow up out of it. It's from the, so we've got, I think we're just continuing to get a little weirder as we go, or a little farther from the usual imagery. So here we've got someone, this is the Tarot of the 78 Keys, And, you know, again, she's pouring water out of the urns without fear that it will run out. This is the Pulp Tarot. And a bit unusual because this person has the urns but isn't pouring them anywhere. So, you know, I don't know. I'd almost be tempted to read that. It's positive. She doesn't look unhappy, but I might read it a bit differently than a normal one. And here we have the tarot of the haunted house. And this is a person, I believe she might have just probably recently escaped some event in the haunted house and is making a wish on a falling star. So a more straightforward card. This is from the Ferenc Pinter, which is an art deck, and she's not fully nude in this one, but is confident and has her clothing open. So, you know, I think you still get some of the same meanings. She's got this star up at her crown chakra, so I think still get the same meanings from that one. This is the Tarot of the Abyss. I like the difference in angle for this one. It almost feels like you're with her looking up at the stars, so maybe even kind of pulls in some of the navigational or maritime cues that are often within this card. Just when you're dealing with a guiding star, I think navigation is always kind of pulled in. So looks like she might be traveling and looking for aid from a star. It's from the Magical Hours Tarot. So this one also chooses it as a night scene as usual. And again, like we just talked about with the maritime references or navigation, this one does have a boat on there specifically. She's not really doing anything in particular, but you know, I guess it's not super important to show activity, as this is more of an introspective card overall. I believe it's not really saying that you need to do anything. It's more internal work, faith, belief, hope, that sort of thing. And then this is the Black Tarot, and I really thought this one was very beautiful. It's also purpley, and I do think another deck mentioned that purple is the color of Aquarius, so I thought that was an interesting tie-in. But here you've got, you can see the outline of shackles there, and so, you know, the guidebook talks about, I actually think I might just read the guidebook section from this one, as it's quite good. Okay, yes. So here we go. A couple are freed of their shackles, joyously following the light from the North Star. The two are ready for the calm of freedom after the storm and the devastation of enslavement. They celebrate clarity after years of disillusionment. They have hope, knowing that everything they need is within them. Their gifts, abundance, and wisdom are all the sweeter for the struggles and challenges they had endured. It speaks to creativity and inspiration, asking how we can spread hope. So yeah, and it does mention, you know, needing healing and that you should take care of yourself in a variety of ways. I just thought that was particularly poignant. And oh yes, this is the Tarot of Vampyres, and I believe that's the one that mentioned purple being a color associated with Aquarius. And let me look at my notes for this one. The 7-pointed star is one that's associated with Venus specifically. There is a crow in here instead of an ibis. The book did mention that apparently that's the totem animal of the air element. So I suppose that makes sense, and maybe that can also apply with the two crow tarots I'll be including. Although of course those include crows in every card. So. The Bloody Cross is meant to represent the death of the ego. And there's just, so this person is also pouring from the chalices onto the living and the dead. So, you know, it's changing things up a little bit there. And it mentions that this card is about wish fulfillment, but also a longing for the divine. And I thought that was interesting. I don't know that I saw that in my other deck guidebooks, and I appreciated that. I really sat with that one for a minute. you know, so it's about a longing for connection and reaching out like that. This is from the Hedgewitch Tarot, and the guidebook mentioned that the person is actually in the shape of a star herself. It really kind of threw me off with the 70s dress. I was just like, oh, Disco Inferno. But she is touching the hedges and the ground here, and then, you know, we have the usual star symbology above her. The Linestrider Tarot, we've got the star up here, we've got the ibis, the pouring from the urns. There's only one, but the guidebook mentions that this person is very much part water and part land. As you can see, they're like partially a mermaid at the bottom here, and that's kind of where this one was going with that imagery. Okay, now we're getting into the more, it gets weirder as we go. This is from the Horror Tarot. This one was particularly interesting because using the Ouija board, it is a person who's reaching out. It is someone who's reaching out for the divine. What are they gonna get? I don't know. I don't mess with that stuff personally myself. But I did think that was a very interesting interpretation of the card. Yeah. This is from the Urban Tarot, which is often more Thoth-based. Anyways, I did look in the guidebook. We've got the usual star imagery here, and apparently this person is in front of a homeless shelter, like a famous one in New York, and reaching out for help. So the angle of this photo was taken from below. The photographer wanted us to feel like maybe we were almost in the gutters and looking for something to help us here. So I thought that was an interesting take, although maybe could have been a little bit, maybe added some clues about what this building is supposed to be, because otherwise I would not know that. This is the John Bauer Tarot, and for this one we've got a man really bowed over riding on this horse, and honestly this kind of reads more like the reversal of the star, where you're feeling kind of beat down and hopeless. But maybe this is after a fight and he's recovering. I'm not sure. This is the Tarot of Mystical Moments. The star is actually, the guidebook mentions this is a male, so I don't mind. Look, a male dipping into his feminine energies. That's fine. We've all got feminine and masculine. But yeah, so definitely a different take on that. This is from the Ceccoli deck. This one has, I don't think we're on Earth at all. It looks like our star is definitely a divine being out in the cosmos. So I think this is definitely more about the connection with the divine. Cozy Witch Tarot, more of a modern take. This character is actually, the guidebook described it as, you can see these branches are down, so she's outside looking at the damage after a storm, but the sky is clear and you can see the stars. So that's kind of where they're going with the story in this one. Just a modern take on it. Here we have another modern one, but more basic. We have the Adventure Tarot, and we just have a person who's out hiking and looking at the stars at night and maybe making a wish on this falling star here. This is the Pastoral Tarot, and again we've got people making a wish on a star, so similar to this one. We just got kind of the same imagery here. And then this one is very abstract. This is from the Lumina Visions. You know, I am always blanking on that one. But if you look closely, you can see the outline of a person here who's falling. I believe it was intended to be a person who fell from the tower itself. And so they're still in the darkness. They haven't made it to the light yet, but there's tendrils of light that are kind of grasping them and slowing their fall. So I think that's where they're kind of trying to go with it. Now, I believe we are got some animal decks here. So this is the Kawaii Tarot. It's the one by Lulu Mayo, not the other one, which is just a pip deck. And here we have the star, all of the usual imagery, just with little frogs instead of a person. So, and this is the Herb Crafter Tarot. We've got cottonwood as the choice for this one. And they chose that because a cottonwood tree indicates the presence of water nearby. So if you were out in the woods, if you were thirsty and you needed something to give you hope that civilization and water was nearby, you would be happy to see a cottonwood rather. And, you know, of course, they've got the leaves forming the shape of the stars and all of that. This is the Hush Tarot. Now, I like this because if you're looking at the plant life and the animal as kind of the main character, it really is saying that life will move on. Maybe there was a battlefield on this field in the past, but the local wildlife are recovering, that sort of thing. You know, this bird's very chipper with its little fabric banner, right? But of course, you could also read it in the reversal, which the reversal is often, you know, if you feel hopeless or fearful or insecure, you have to think of the ways that can manifest in a person. And sometimes that can be like arrogance or aggressiveness, I suppose. And so I think it would be very easy to also read this card as arrogance if you're looking at this skull as the main character, right? They showed up and it went badly, right? So an interesting card. Here we have the Tarot Landscapes. I love this little card. It's pretty simple, but I think it is showing, you know, it's really showing as above, so below, you know, the divine coming down to earth, a light up in the sky and a light on the land, right? For once, I kind of understood this one, so I'm again proud of myself this month. But for this one, this is Midnight Magic. It's a deck about mushrooms, and for this one, they chose the Golden Reishi. Only read it, never said it. But anyways, this mushroom is an adaptogen, so it's like a mood stabilizer, that sort of thing. So you're definitely feeling good after that one, right? Here we have the Crow Tarot, so we've got a lot of the same symbols. We've even got the 5 streams coming from this one down here, the foot on land, foot on water. So a lot of the same stuff, they're just using a crow in place of a person. The bird isn't an ibis. It is orange though, which is interesting because our next card does also have an orange bird, specifically an oriole, and I believe that's because they are associated with brighter future, and the guidebook even mentioned happy changes within 2 weeks because that's when its eggs hatch. So I thought that was interesting. I don't really do predictive readings, so I'm never familiar with timeline type stuff like that. And this, I think, is a really beautiful card. It's from the Sacred Web Tarot. This, I think, is a really good one. And I just noticed, again, we have purple at the bottom, which is related to Aquarius. And we've got a frog who's been in like the sea of consciousness, the energy of the universe, or something like that, and is linked to the web of life. That's what the guidebook mentioned. So I think that's a really beautiful card. This is from the Orion's Animal Tarot. We've got, again, what looks like almost a maritime compass, and plus this is a ocean scene, so it does make me think of navigation like we've seen before. I did read the guidebook, but frankly, I don't know that they had a good enough reason to use this jellyfish. It wasn't explained in a way that I really bought into, so I think I would just be going with the usual meanings of the star for this one, although it is very beautiful. This is from the Antique Anatomy Tarot. We've got, so we have these vertebrae in place of the stars, with one being larger, kind of indicating the usual star imagery. They're just using anatomy instead. And then you've got this finger kind of pointing to the North Star again. So an odd way to do it, but I think they're going at the same meaning. Now these next few are either like fairy tale or based on some sort of tale. This is the Ghost and Spirits Tarot. The one that this is referencing is the Cloud People, or Shiwana. I believe it's a Pueblo belief or story. They bring rain after droughts. So, I mean, that's certainly about bringing hope and, you know, hoping for rain after a long dry spell. This one doesn't have a specific reference. It's just from the Star Spinner Tarot, which sometimes relates to fairy tales and sometimes just has a fairy tale vibe. I think the latter is the case here. So we've just got the usual imagery, maybe a divine person here, a divine feminine, pouring the water in the ibis. This is from the Woodland Fairy Tale Tarot. Yeah. And this is Cinderella. So I think that makes sense. She's in bad circumstances, and what gives her hope is her fairy godmother, a divine being. So you can kind of think of your fairy godmother, your guardian angel, that sort of thing, you know, represented by the offer of this glass slipper. This is the Slavic Legends Tarot. This one is based off of Zorsa, which is the goddess of dawn, hope, and rebirth. It's the end of darkness and the arrival of a new day. So this card, like the Druidcraft Tarot, also decided to include dawn, and that, you know, there's calm after the storm, and then, you know, dawn after a long night. And they're both kind of going with that imagery there. This is the Shadowscapes Tarot. No reference to a particular story, but it does look very fairy tale fantasy-like. And you've just got a divine being under the star here, touching the water. And yeah. This is the Tarot of the Divine. The story here is Sister Alyanushka and Brother Ivanushka. The brother is turned into a goat, but it leads to her meeting her husband, and they're able to trick the witch who casts the spell and turn the brother back in the end. So just a happy ending tale, I think. Okay, we are on to the last batch, and here we have the Aquarian Tarot. Again, we've got a peacock, so I'm kind of wondering if it intends to convey the same, or at least it looks like a peacock to me, right? I'm not really sure, actually. So I wonder if it means the same as the Tarot of the Witch's Garden from earlier. This is from the Vinci Enigma Tarot, where it's just Da Vinci's sketches. And this one is John the Baptist showing a way forward and showing a little something else too. But anyways, he's showing a way forward, perhaps when it's thought that there was none. So providing hope for those following him, or Jesus, I suppose. This one is from the Mary L. Tarot. You know, I was thinking about studying this one next month, and then I looked at the guidebook, and frankly, I remain confused, so I may put it off until I learn more. I believe this is an angelic being over crowds below on earth, and she's granting them divine knowledge. Maybe? I don't know. The guidebook was a little rough for me, I'll tell you that. Okay, so now we have the InBetween Tarot. And the idea of this deck is that it mixes each card. So you have the Tower and the Star here, and then you have the Star and the Moon here. And it goes on in both directions. That's what they do with all the cards. So I think it gives you very, very different readings. Because for this one, we do have like a cataclysmic event, but we have people who are unable to escape those circumstances. In the story, I think they were slaves, perhaps, like in the story of this deck as it goes along. And now they're kind of escaping from their circumstances by following this North Star. And then for the Star and the Moon, we've got, they are still following the Star, but now they're out on the water. They're kind of seeing these ghost ships. So, you know, they're still going towards that Star, but there's some uncertainty and fear, some imaginings going on, that sort of thing. So I think that's a very interesting deck, and really, I think you get very different readings when you use it, because essentially, at the end of the day, there's nothing that's like a pure star card at the end of the day. This one is the Tarot of the Spirit. We have these two figures reflected. So it's very like as above, so below. You know, here's the divine consciousness kind of reflecting itself down onto creation and the world. We've got the stars here as usual too. The guidebook mentioned that the unhindered mind reflects truth perfectly. This one is the Hermetic Tarot, and you know, I picked this up and I will study it one day, but today is not that day, because I looked at that little white book and it just left me with more questions, I'll tell you that. Anyways, this is the Hermetic Tarot. The 7-pointed star represents Venus, like we've seen in some of the other decks. And, you know, you can see how they've got the stars arranged around here with the planetary symbols that we saw in some other decks as well. They probably got it, you know, from, this was probably the source of that, right? We have the Tree of Life in the bottom here. It mentions that this somehow represents the different hours of the day, I think. I don't know about that. This is called the Dove of Knowledge, and then this, or this? I think it's this. This might be the mathematical representation of the universe. Not sure. Anyways, there's a lot going on here. I do see the original imagery, but I would be lost with this one, so I will leave it there for people who are more familiar with all of the esoteric symbology. And just called the Daughter of the Firmament. I do like these titles. I'm used to that from the Tarot of Vampyres, which I believe got those from here, but yeah. The Ephemere Tarot is quite different in the majors, but I did grab the one that's listed as equivalent to the star. It's called Defiance. It means hope, but also it's more active, so it also means things like resistance and audacity. In the image, there's a person facing a maze, but she's reaching into the center to pluck a light from the constellation and is bashing the remainder of the maze with that hammer. So quite different, I think. Oh, we are on the very last one. All right, this is the Tarot of Light and Shadow, which has 2 decks within it. One has like the light version and one does a dark version, maybe a reversal. But anyways, here we've got the regular imagery, but in the dark version you can see that she is not pouring out from the urns. I believe that means there's perhaps somewhere in her mind a fear of a future time of need and a failure to trust in the abundance of the universe. You know, she is unable to continuously pour out. She's afraid that that resource will not be replenished. So, you know, I thought that was a really interesting take on it and a useful comparison there as well. All right, so we made it through. Hopefully I've included all the correct cards this time, and that you didn't mind me yapping too much, but that is it. We've got the star for this month, and next month is, let me check real quick to give you a spoiler. Okay, I just checked, and my card for the next month is the Queen of Pentacles, which is interesting considering that we did the Empress, and sometimes I kind of conflate those two. So that'll be a useful study for me at least. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this. Let me know if you had a particular favorite from these, or if there's another deck where you really like the star card. So, all right, I think that is all. Bye and have a good day.